American patriots, this is a plea. As Reagan once said, we are one generation away from our freedoms being extinct. Fast forward to today, I believe we are one election away from our freedoms being extinct. We can no longer be complacent. We must stand up and fight for America First conservatives at all levels of politics. I will refuse to be the generation to explain to my kid what freedom was like. Decades of damage has been done. It's our time. It's our country. It's our freedoms. You are listening to the Light of Liberty podcast. Welcome to the Light of Liberty podcast, where we spread truth and we safeguard our freedoms. We are at the 11 o'clock hour approaching the Pennsylvania primaries. The Republican ticket is getting national attention, and I believe the way Pennsylvania goes is the way the nation goes this November. We are tired of this establishment. We are tired of being told what to do and what to think. The establishment showed its ugly mug this past week with baseless and embarrassing attacks. Joining us today, who is the front runner for the Republican nomination for governor. Welcome to the show, Senator Doug Mastriano.
Thank you for having me on. And yes, the swamp struck back, but they struck and they failed. They missed, and Donald Trump came in the midst of their conspiring with each other swamp-like creatures and endorsed me and cut the legs out from underneath them. So people of Pennsylvania, I mean, tomorrow is our day. Tomorrow you get to decide the trajectory of our state and our nation for the next 40 years. It's a big deal.
Yeah, you bring up that big endorsement over the weekend, and the legacy media, I mean, they're doing everything they can to slander your campaign, but you're not slowing down. You're just speeding up. You're taking punch after punch. We're going to start calling you Rocky Balboa near the end here, and because you're on this late surge here. What do you attest this movement to?
You bring something up there. Anyone who watches polls and having, normally there's like a leader, and then as you get closer to the vote, like a month or a few weeks out, it narrows down, the gap closes. It's too close to call, kind of thing. And for us, after we entered the race in January, we've been consistently ahead in almost every poll. And then the gap has grown. In the past week, we went from 8 points ahead to 10 points ahead to 12 points ahead. And then with last night's Emerson College poll, I'm almost 20 points ahead.
Yeah.
And it's this momentum that the people, well, I think there's a few things. When the polls happen, normally they focus on super voters. They'll call people who have a 4 voting record. Past 4 years, they voted each time 4 times, or 4 or 3s maybe. But they miss people that voted only half the time the last 4 years, or once, or maybe not even at all. And so what's happening here is actually they're getting a more true sample of what we have. Additionally, we just wrapped up our statewide bus tour, which was really outstanding. It was my first bus tour, and it was magnificent. And, I mentioned off air, I was kind of curious if the traditional media would note, I'm a strategist and a planner trained in those areas, but they didn't catch on. Any astute, open-minded journalist would have reviewed our stops and it's like, whoa, day 1, he had a rally in Pittsburgh in the evening. Day 2, he had a rally in traditionally Democrat stronghold of Erie in the evening. I mean, and then, then he finished in the suburbs of Philadelphia on the last Saturday. And none of them had the astuteness to say, whoa, he's transitioning already into the general election mode. Received endorsements from Latinos and many others. So this late surge, I believe I've been way ahead all along here, but the excitement is just growing. And so even in these polls really focusing on a narrow area of voters, it's coming out now.
Absolutely. And your tweet earlier sums it up perfectly from your endorsement from 45. The honors to the people, us, and that's what you're fighting for in that America First and Pennsylvania First agenda. And we appreciate that. But let's head into what's going on in society right now, and the inflation and the energy crisis. And Pennsylvania, we live here, we walk on gold right now. So what are the plans to unleash that energy?
You're right. And, God has blessed Pennsylvania with just incredible, massive natural resources. And we've been developing them for hundreds of years. And when you walk into the grandeur and magnificence of our capital in Harrisburg, built over 120 years ago or so, it was when Pennsylvania was the richest state in the nation. Now, if we were an independent country, we'd be eighth in the world. But there's no evidence of this wealth, the way that we have such a Byzantine bureaucracy, oppressive system, overtaxation, roads and infrastructure that are falling apart, bridges that are collapsing. And so surveyors and geologists did a look at our shale and our coal deposits and even our oil. And they say that we could supply the nation for a few centuries. Obviously, that's a sample. That's their assessment, and I don't want to get caught up in a debate with the liberal media. Of course, they only fact check us. They don't fact check their own people themselves, by the way. But the bottom line is the way we start to unleash the potential in Pennsylvania and make us the bright shining star in the nation of prosperity is to aggressively develop our energy resources. And we're number 3 in the nation right now, energy production, number 2 overall. And sorry, I got these incoming calls. Number 2 in natural gas, number 3 in coal, 3 overall. We should be number 1, and under Mastriano, we will be. How am I going to do this? And I don't operate bumper stickers. I might throw a slogan out there, but it's backed up. I'm a planner and strategist. It's backed up by clear, achievable means on how to accomplish this. So on day 1, I remove us from this CO2 cap and trade mini Paris climate accords called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And on day 1, I'm withdrawing us from that. That'll be near instant savings of 30% on your energy costs, because we're going to be paying, thank you, Tom Wolf, not $1 million the first year that we're a member, and he just signed us up for it, of Reggie, and $2 billion over the next 2 years. It's a climate scheme of sorts. Number 2 is, of course, rolling back all the regulations and restrictions that I can legally off of our energy sector that Tom Wolf has put on the past 8 years. And then, of course, making lands available. Additionally, making permitting for development of energy resources expedited. I actually have legislation as a senator in place that does all that. And so what I'll do is I'll do an executive order sweeping across where I can without legislation. And then just about anything I say I'm going to do with the executive order, there's legislation that exists, some of which that I'm a sponsor of. I look forward to signing into law.
Doug, let me ask you, more current events going on right now. In this country right now, we're seeing a baby formula shortage. We're seeing the poultry industry being attacked by this new avian flu they're talking about. They're destroying flocks in various states across the country. And then we're also being threatened with food shortages, coupled with we're seeing the loss of farmland. What are your thoughts on that?
And in some of these regards here, I actually have legislation on preserving farmland. I just introduced a week or 2 ago. And but okay, let's lay it out strategically. Let's pull out and look at it 50,000 feet or so. Number 1, first off, the Biden administration is populated by the most ignorant and some of the most uneducated and most incompetent people in the nation's history working at the national level. And Pete Buttigieg, for instance, under him, the transportation sector is about to collapse because of his sheer incompetence. He took months off for leave, and as the nation's collapsing, and we have ships stacked off our coasts, off our ports, and around Christmas time. And they actually warned us about this. They predicted it because they created it. And then, of course, this transportation sector of getting goods to people. We see the wild, wild west and the yards outside of Los Angeles where people are climbing on trains and, taking packages out and stealing things left and right. And this is sheer incompetence. Additionally, the border is wide open. Now, every state in the nation, including Pennsylvania, is a border state, thanks to Biden's failed policies. He cares more about securing Ukraine's border than our own southwestern border. And this is a boom for drug trafficking. We already have 4,000 fentanyl deaths a year in Pennsylvania, and that's going to skyrocket vis-a-vis China coming over that Mexican border. Sex trafficking. I mean, it's disgusting what's happening and the abuse that's happening. And Joe Biden and the Democrat Party has gone so extreme. They're far left, and they've left many of the people in Pennsylvania behind that are traditional, family-oriented Democrats, including the vast majority of the Latino population of Pennsylvania. And so what we're seeing here is just merely the manifestation of sheer incompetence. And who's running our country? Joe Biden has to be, protected by the Easter Bunny. We saw that a few weeks ago.
Yeah, we saw that.
Anyway, and led by the hand by Jill Biden. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So this is where we are.
Yeah, that's you bring up a good point with this Biden administration. And then we know you're pro-life. Talk to us a little bit about this Supreme Court leak that happened the other week. What are the implications going forward on the security of the Supreme Court and Justice Roe versus Wade in general?
Well, first off, the leaker needs to be found out and punished, because this is undermining our judicial branch, which is supposed to operate independent. Their decisions are supposed to be, kept well guarded until they make it public. And apparently, for political reasons, somebody working within the Supreme Court of the United States thought it was a good idea to leak this in order to let protesters show up, which is a felony, by the way, outside the justices' houses to threaten them. Justice Alito had to be moved to a safe and secure location because of threats on his life. And first off, I'm discussing it on several levels. If you went to Washington, D.C. on January 6th and did not violate any laws, you're not an insurrectionist. And I come against the Democrats and everyone in the media that keeps on perpetuating this deceitful, dishonest talking point. Knock it off. We watch your people violate laws constantly and get bailed out of prison by Kamala Harris. We saw that with Minneapolis and the other thing. If a Republican bailed out somebody, if they're given bail, for whatever happened, in January of 2021, they'd be tarred and feathered. But it's okay. And it's okay to burn down cities in mostly peaceful protests. It's okay to have a protest in Harrisburg with Governor Wolf violating his own edicts on COVID protections. It's okay for him to walk around protected by police with a Blue Lives Murder sign behind his head and not be told to renounce that or asked to denounce that. It's okay for the folks to gather after the governor left and they become violent in, mostly peaceful protests. A kid from one of the local affiliates in Harrisburg said it was mostly peaceful, but one of our Capitol Police was hit in the head with a brick. Well, that's not peaceful. And so this inconsistency and double standard needs to end. And we need to call the media out for that and stop. And we need to stop being cowards. Additionally here, it's funny. The Democrats don't believe in border walls, but Nancy Pelosi has the Berlin Wall around her house in San Francisco. Yeah. If they don't believe in closed borders, if they believe in open borders, then they should not lock their windows or their doors, because it's the same thing. People like you and me suffer the consequences of these failed policies. And I'm friends with a family over in Tennessee, and their son was a UPS driver, was killed tragically by an illegal that was DUI without a license. Slammed into his vehicle and killed him. And that should never happen. That illegal should not have been here. But Joe Biden's opening up the border here to transform our country.
Yeah, and you have that administration peddling their leftist following to hit the streets and go to the residents and protest in front of the Chief Justice's houses. You have, I believe, the mayor of Chicago tweeting call to arms. That's how do we hold these people accountable to this nonsense, which is exactly what it is. It's nonsense, and it's peddling just more violence and more divide. And
we do know Chicago has plenty of arms in it. They have some of the strictest gun laws, and they have some of the highest, probably the highest crime rate, murder rate.
Yeah, I think there were 30.
And Democrats keep calling out for more gun control, this and that. They always blame the gun. They don't blame the person behind it.
As far as, Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago, she's one of the most radical far leftist mayors in the nation here, who obviously has no like for her people and doesn't care that crime and murder is happening on a level unprecedented in Chicago history. And, that's included when Al Capone was in town there. I mean, it's terrible to me. And the media, of course, likes to paint conservatives as far right. You know what? We're very mainstream, actually. I asked them which beliefs and policies exactly is far right about Mastriano. I had a top secret special compartmented information access, top secret TSI SCI access for 30 years in the Army, 7 or 8 background investigations. If there was a thread or a shed or a feather of indication of any extremism in me, I would not have access to some of the nation's most sensitive and damaging secrets. Facts are stubborn things. But they suffer from a psychological disorder on the left, and the media, the left-wing media that's carries their message. Is called transference. They actually are the far left in the nation, but they call other people from the very things that they're guilty of. That's called transference. It's a psychological disorder, and they of course they can't see it, and the media can't see it either. So first off, how we deal with it is we call it for what it is. We do not accept their terms for us. We do not accept their labels, and actually point where the labels belong. And so the far left are the people that are damaging and destroying this nation here, that they can get away with literally calling for violence. We saw Maxine Waters, get in their faces, and disruption. And now we have Mayor Lightfoot calling to arms. Could you imagine if somebody on the conservative side said that, the uproar and umbrage there would be? They're calling for violence, insurrectionists, throw them in jail. And that we have incompetent people, leading our Department of Justice here, that are willing to label parents in school board meetings as domestic terrorists for simply speaking their mind as outlined, delineated, and protected in the Constitution. But yet, folks can get away with all kinds of harm and damage and felonies because they're on a politically acceptable side of an issue.
Yeah, 2 years ago out in Seattle, when they took over the like a whole city block. They moved into the police station out there, and that occurred for like 28 days or something like that. And that, if you go to Wikipedia, you look up that event and they label that as a peaceful protest. But Wikipedia, if you go there and look up January 6th, it was an insurrection.
Yeah, I absolutely refuse to use Wikipedia, and I'm encouraging people to go elsewhere, maybe to Britannica.com, the old encyclopedia. They actually have honest articles there, and not this propaganda that Wikipedia is populated by radical editors and what have you. They've been compromised, and it's a darn shame. You know what? We need to stand on our own 2 feet here. We're on the right side of history. Facts on our side, and we need to explain that to the media and to the other folks. Obviously, I'm in a position that I get challenged and called names by the media, who's often apt to do the bidding of their favorite party, the Democrats. And we do know for a fact that the DNC and Democrat Legislative Campaign Committee last year blacklisted, sounds very McCarthy-like, blacklisted 21 Republicans at the state level. I was, I'm told by the Political article that came out last November, I was number 1 on their hit list. And their goal was to collude with the media with the same talking points, which they all used and marched, blindly forward to hit me and the other Republicans that they blacklisted with terrible propaganda, disinformation, and baseless claims, and all kinds of name calling, hoping that it would force, me and others to resign in shame. And they don't know who they're up against here. And so but okay, that's interesting. So you deal, and they did a poll in November, hoping it damaged me. It did not, and made me the most popular Republican in Pennsylvania. So they regretted that, but it seems like they're falling back. They forget that it doesn't work because they did it for Donald Trump for so many years. It's one thing to get it from the media and the Democrats. You expect that because, we're on opposite sides of the spectrum, at least ideologically, politically speaking. But when you get it from the Republicans, and we see now the establishment Republicans, using some of the old chestnuts from the Democrat playbook here to try to discredit me and other people that they don't like. Now, that's disgusting.
Yeah, I know them just recently when they were trying to orchestrate against you to get some of the runners to drop out to endorse the other their other candidate. It just shows that they are not subservient to the people. There is another puppet master pulling their strings, calling the shots, and we know we're behind you, and we know you're not like that.
Yeah,
and they're for us.
They're being exposed. Like if anything, they're being exposed, and we're waking up to it. We're seeing it, and that's why we're behind you. And when we go out and we talk to other Pennsylvanians, especially during your petition process, one of the things that really came up is a lot of people are not going to let what happened in 2020 go. They are fed up. They are not wanting to let it go. And they have so many unanswered questions, and they just want the truth, and they want transparency out there. And I know you're a big advocate in the election integrity. So heading forward, will you continue that fight for election integrity?
So And I'm going to, set this up here before I answer your question head on. So November 3rd happens 2020. And wow, I'm getting calls from across the state, emails and messages about a lot of corruption and shenanigans and foul play during the election. I'm not going to go over it now. I naively thought that the folks that have been in Senate, in politics for 20, 30 years would actually do something. They didn't. So I put together a hearing in Gettysburg, wanted to hear what the heck happened, wanted to hear from the people on the 25th of November of 2020. And it just shed a light on a lot of problems in Pennsylvania. And I challenged the media to do their jobs. There was a time when even the Inquirer back in 1993, there was a controversial state Senate race between Marks and Stinson. Stinson, a Democrat, won. Marks made a lot of allegations of voting fraud. The Inquirer, I wish they were of the caliber and quality that they were back then. The Inquirer did investigative journalism out that Republican was right. There was massive fraud and cheating. And literally, the Democrat senator sitting in Harrisburg was removed. Marks was put in, Republican. It flipped control of the Senate. It was a huge, huge decision by a federal judge. And that's what I had hoped to see. I didn't know the outcome, but I had hoped to see that instead of, writing off, the allegations and claims and the evidence for that matter, that somebody in the media would actually, take the challenge and look into it to see if it was so. And instead they went to name calling. They took the Democrat talking points, advancing baseless claims of voting fraud, trying to overturn the election. Just every single last one of these legacy media outlets there. How disappointing. The purpose of the First Amendment, there's 5 freedoms delineated in there. Speech, religion, assembly. Oh, you can only assemble if it's a state approved event. That's where the Democrats are leading us. Redress your government and the press. And the purpose of freedom of press, obviously, there's many facets to it, but one of it is to hold all people in power accountable, not just one particular party. But sadly, I have not seen evidence of the traditional media actually caring to look after facts, instead just chasing their little dog whistles here, baseless claims and what have you. Okay, now, 2020, I tried to get an forensic audit done, forensic investigation. That's a newish kind of term that came out of Arizona last spring. I went to Arizona, saw what they were doing late in the spring of last year, and we need to do that in Pennsylvania. I was a day away from having a vote of my committee. I needed a majority vote of my committee to issue the subpoenas on behalf of my committee. And that's, of course, when the corrupt establishment leadership stepped in and, stripped me of my committee powers, stripped me of my staff in Harrisburg, kicked me out of caucus, all this drama, unprecedented in Pennsylvania history. And that same person turned around, months later and said he wanted an investigation of the election. Still hasn't happened 8 years later. 8 months later. And so I'm going to find out what happened, and it's not going to happen again. We're going to restore confidence in voting integrity. Of the 9 people running, none of them did anything to help us with what I was doing. None of them lifted a finger. I have like 7 or 8 bills actually in the Senate to make corrections. I get to appoint the Secretary of State, which on behalf of me, the governor, oversees the elections in conjunction with the legislative body. I have a team, Secretary of State and staff that will attack this problem head on and restore confidence. But here's the last thing. Doug, I support you, but I'm not going to vote. My vote doesn't count. What a ridiculous, weak thing to say. Do you love your country so little? If you don't vote, guess what? Your vote doesn't count at all. And if you love your country and you love your state and you want to have something left for some freedoms left for your kids and grandkids, then you need to vote tomorrow and on November 8th. And I get it. There's a lot of issues. But look, last May, we had a vote to strip the governor of his supreme kingly powers. And the system was broken as it is still today. And despite it being rigged against us, I'm not going to go over all the details right now. The people of Pennsylvania came out in overwhelming numbers. And we were the first state in the nation to strip the governor of his emergency powers. And so what happened in COVID won't happen again in Pennsylvania because of we the people. And look at Virginia. Last November, the people in Virginia were on the cusp, about to lose their First and Second Amendment rights. That's right. And the people of Virginia said, hell no. And they showed up in overwhelming numbers, Republicans and conservative Democrats. They showed up and voted, and they took their state back. Not only did they vote, but they rolled up their sleeves and got to work. They manned 95% of the polling stations to make sure shenanigans would be at a minimum. That's exactly what we need to do if we want to restore freedom in our state.
Yeah, that just shows that we, the people in this country and in this state, can still make a difference. Our voices will be heard. You brought up a point. Tuesday, tomorrow is the primary election day. So we want everybody to go out and vote. We've encouraged it. What are your plans for tomorrow? I mean, when you wake up tomorrow morning, how does your day start off and how does it finish?
So let me just frame it. So today I'm doing lots of media hits and reaching upwards of a few million people potentially. I don't know what the actual audience is, for all these hits I've been doing. So that's by design. Tomorrow, of course, my wife and I will vote, and then after that, I'll be traveling mostly within my district, visiting polling stations, shaking hands of the poll greeters, and saying hi to any voters coming and going. And so that's going to be my day. In the evening, around 8 p.m., we have a victory party planned in the southern part of Chambersburg. Starts at 8 p.m. Obviously, we won't probably start seeing results until 10 or 11 o'clock tomorrow. So you can come late. Go to my page, dougforgov.com, to register. Yes, you do have to register. That's the world we live in. It's just a security precaution. Come on down and be part of it. There'll be food there and a lot of good fellowship.
Oh, awesome. So let's wrap it up here, Doug. Any last words before tomorrow, before everybody starts to hit those polls, especially for those undecided voters out there?
So we're really excited because last night Emerson College came out with one more poll. I did not think there would be any more. In fact, that Sunday I told people after church that there'll be no more polls, but Emerson College released one. And they actually talked to the undecideds, and which is around 15%. And based off of their poll, they had me at 42%. And then the next individual, like at, I don't know, 21% or what have you. So we almost have a 20-point lead now. We cannot take anything for granted. That's assuming we the people get out to vote. So please today make plans on when and how and where you're going to vote. Please talk to your family members, your roommates, your classmates, your neighbors, friends, relatives, and other folks that you work with. Ask them if you want to go. Hey, you want to go vote together, and afterwards grab breakfast or lunch or dinner. I mean, you can make it a fun event, or you can just be in and out. But please make plans today. If you live in a community with some plain folks, that don't have cars, any Amish nearby or others, ask them if they need a ride. And so think creatively, think broadly. Please consider touching at least 10 people, asking them to make sure they vote tomorrow.
Well, there you have it. Senator, soon to be governor of Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano. Thank you for everything you're doing. Keep the fight alive and keep working hard just like you've been and you continue to do. So get out and vote May 17th and show support for this campaign. Let's relight the light of liberty here in Pennsylvania. Let's believe in your freedom, love your freedom, defend your freedom. Freedom is everything.
We appreciate you for listening to this episode of the Light of Liberty podcast. Please help us share the truth and restore the freedom. Follow us on Twitter at Light of 1776 and listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio.